So far, they've been phenomenal with all the resources that they are sharing. I want us to look at the whole concept of leadership, just as Dr. Elena said. What does leadership mean to you? Because if you don't really resonate what it means with you, then it becomes an abstract. And I believe that every individual is a leader. Let me ask the question, are leaders born or are leaders raised? Let me hear your thoughts. Let's get into a facilitation mode. Are leaders born or are leaders raised? What are your perspectives? Okay, both. I hear both. Is it both or one or the other? All right, so both. Now, can we share some examples of great leaders we admire in this life from the first century to the 21st century? Just name one leader you admire and share with us what makes you admire that person. One historic leader or somebody still alive. It can be me. It can be Nina. It can be Dr. Annamaria. It can be anybody. But share with us one leader that you thought is outstanding and why. Yes.
I personally believe leaders are made, not necessarily born.
Okay.
Because there have been lineages of monarchs and kings where maybe the first king was okay, but the second one was so bad that they come from the same bloodline. But it takes more of learning and more of nurturing for a leader to come out to be outstanding. And one is Martin Luther King, who had so much in his writing, where his writing necessarily didn't talk about him, but talked about resolving conflicts among people and living interdependently or interconnected. And yesterday there was a submission by Dr. Abe about how he made the speech in Washington, D.C. And majority of the people who were there were whites, not blacks. But all along the thinking is like the speech was for black people, but it was about everyone, bringing everyone together to lead, to just have a peaceful world and a peaceful United States of America. So I believe leaders are created or leaders are made and not necessarily born.
Great perspective, Ramona. There you go.
Being a king doesn't necessarily make you a leader. Being a boss doesn't necessarily make you a leader. Bosses don't necessarily behave like leaders. So being a leader, I think you're born with some traits that kind of lead you to, well, guide you towards or sort of open a path for you towards becoming a leader. And if those traits are nurtured by family, the environment, and then education, and then you may become a leader. So, but if those traits are not nurtured in the proper way, then, well, you either don't become a leader or you become the wrong kind of leader. Well, so I don't know if I'm making much sense, but
You're making sense.
Ask what leaders we admire. You talked about the leader in terms of peace. Yeah. Why not admire, I don't know, Alexander the Great? He was a great leader. Genghis Khan, he was a great leader. I mean, if we were to talk to the people back then, they probably would think in a different way. But why was Genghis Khan a great leader? And can we talk about in the same in the same environment where we talk about Martin Luther King? So I'm just trying to sort of underline the fact that there are different kinds of leaders. That's and we need to sort of decide what exactly we're talking about.
I appreciate that. And that's the whole concept that both doctors are trying to, and I'm using a different tool to get us to that same place. You realize that by the time we are done, we will answer Ramona's question. What is it that we are looking for in a leader? Because there is always a common denominator of every good leader, irrespective of whether you are a monarch, whether you are a born leader, whether you are a trade leader, whether you are a career leader, whether you are an academic leader, there is always a common denominator which will come to. So any other perspective? Any other perspective? Yes.
I think Jesus is the supreme leader. He mirrored God. He is love, and he saw every person as who we are in a soul. It let the children come to me, let any kind of job that it doesn't count, but his soul, the soul who lies into us, he healed
That's okay.
the soul and the body of the and he said your trust you not me, not and this is very important.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Can we have one more of a historic leader or a leader that you admire and why? Nelson Mandela, why? Power of education, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah.
His heart to fight for equity.
Good.
Peace.
Awesome. Pay attention to the attributes that they are mentioning as they describe each leader. Yes, sir. I saw your honor.
Yeah, regarding whether a leader is born or made, if we go into history, we see that it's very different from case to case, but mostly leaders are forced in fire, in blood, in hardships. Genghis Khan was mentioned.
Yeah.
He was an amazing leader by
Yeah.
the standards of the time. He was a bastard. He was abandoned by everyone. He was hunted down by other Mongol tribes. He raised to prominence through these hardships, which forced him and made him a stalwart leader, a strong one, a leader that sought to raise the others. He promoted the system of meritocracy that was non-existent basically at the time. If you go through other spaces of history, you look at Octavian Augustus,
Because
who
there's
was the nephew of Julius Caesar.
Caesar.
He was a boy, really, raised in the turbulent times of the late Roman Republic with the civil wars, the court intrigue, the backstabbings, and all of this raised this boy into what would become the first emperor of the Roman Empire. So I think it's through these hardships that a leader is made.
It's made. Absolutely. I love that. Please.
În chiarismă, consider că devin nu că te lași lider, pentru că toți liderii din istorie deja menționați au învățat să fie lideri, nu s-au născut așa, chiar dacă provin din familii aristocrate, unii dintre ei sau din familii, toți au învățat să devină lideri de-a lungul unor oameni. Până când au ajuns lideri, au trecut mulți oameni, mulți ani de învățare, de practică, de experiențe pozitive, negative. Abia atunci devine lider care poate controla mulți oameni.
Olympia. So leadership is the process of becoming that involves a lot of learning. You have a starting point, no matter your family of origin. So the learning is involved that can take years, maybe generations to become a leader.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So everything that we've all shared is all the attributes. Now, there's a common denominator, which is understanding your why. Why are you a leader? Nelson Mandela, you described, is considered a leader because he understood his why. He fought many, many years of his life to show to the world what it means to be a leader. Spent 27 years in jail, came out and had dinner or lunch with the same person that put him in jail. How many of us can do that? So if you want to be a leader, and I believe all of us are leaders, but we have to understand our why. Without the why, you would just be evolving without in the wind. So all that I'm trying to say is that irrespective of where you find yourself, and we can use classic examples of all of us here. I like to, so for instance, let's use Dr. Annamaria right here. She is an academic leader because she understood her why, because she wants to see students become successful. That is her why. So even if the university will not pay her to do the work, she still has passion and love to see students empowered. I hope the university will pay her. You understand? Because there's something more important that keeps you awake. And that is what stirs up leadership in you. That's why I asked the initial question, the premise of my question, whether leaders are made or born. It all depends on what boils or stirs up in you as a leader. When, for instance, if there's fire right now, all of us in this room will definitely have a leader who will show us which way to go. Because I am new to the building. All of us here are new to the building. Most of you here know the building. And so we will look at the leadership to say, use left, use right. Because leadership, it's all about leading and influencing. And so if we want to have a new concept and a new model of leadership that Nina and Elena is talking about, what we need to appreciate and realize is that, am I a leader? What makes me a leader? And that leads me to my next question to all of you as I'm facilitating, and I'll hand it over back to them. But if we've been able to identify historic leaders and we've been able to understand why they are leaders, the question to you is, are you a leader? And if you are, what makes you a leader? Let's have another interesting conversation from all of you. If you're a leader, what makes you a leader? I know it's thought-provoking. It's okay. Think deep, go deeper, search your soul, search yourself, because for me, leadership is accountability. Leadership is about virtues, as I talked about earlier on. So what is it that makes you a leader? And how do you exhibit your leadership? When people who knows you, not that who don't know you, those who knows you, will they describe you as a leader? And why would they describe you as a leader? Think a bit deeper. And you're welcome to share why you think you are a leader.
And what your values
And
are.
what your values are.
That sets the tone.
That's correct.
You know, what is it that you daydream inside?
Let me hear you.
And you know, and you can be a leader in little things. It's
Absolutely.
not, doesn't mean leader of the world. It
Yep.
means leadership for standing up for what you believe.
What people they be. It can even be in your study group, organizing a small course of learning, but you have to exert that leadership. So what is it for you as a leader, and why do you consider yourself as a leader? Yes.
The first time I realized I had leadership was because I was able to lead myself. I have discovered by traveling the world, that there are many voices and there are many interests and there are many needs and problems that are calling inside myself to pay attention to them. And the leadership that I discovered was actually absolutely crucial, was to sift through that, to see the conditioning, to see the programming inside myself, and to know what I am giving attention to in the moment, what I am following, what I'm driving, what I'm planning, organizing, doing with myself and with other people, so that I am most aligned with what I want to nurture in myself, in the midst of many, many internal voices and pulls and distractions of the world.
I love that. I love that. And anyone else want to share perspective? Yes, Rome?
Yes, well, I'm a leader based on these three, I would say, pillars they have, because I remember when since I was 15, I was every room I enter or any setting, people try to look at me and try to identify themselves like me. So I was always like, I said, always the person in the front, trying to fight for the others, and based on my character, people always think, okay, they want to connect me because they see me as a good example and they want to be like me. So the other one is the virtue like you mentioned, because I'm someone who would never see someone suffering and just let go. So I always try to look at what can I do instead of judging the person, but I try to see what solution can be made make the person feel happy and feel comfortable. About the value, you have three principles of values of respect, honesty, and commitment. These are the things that are very important for me because as I respect someone, I also expect the person to respect me. Also talk about honesty because if we are working together, we want to achieve something and we need to be honest in ourselves. And commitment, because when you say you want to do something, do it.
That's correct.
So
Awesome.
I want to add that what we're talking about is the new leadership for a birthing of a new understanding of how we can operate as a world.
Yes.
Because otherwise we're going to destroy each other, and that does not work.
Yeah.
So for us that are living and our children who will inherit this world, we must begin to think of new leadership. Yeah, and new leadership, just as Ramon said, is about thinking of the other, connected. It's not making oneself better than, it's not judging. Because the minute you judge another person, you separate out. You make yourself better and they are worse. And that they should be just like you want them to be for you. It's not about you want them to be for themselves. So how do you do that? You open your mind and you really hear the other person. Because it's time that we value each other.
Great.
We cannot exist if we don't do that. You're going to see a lot of destruction. So if you're here now, you have to start to think about the world you want and how to get there. So every step you take makes a difference. Yeah. And that's how you lead. Yeah.
Appreciate that, Nina. I think I saw a hand up here.
I feel like every time I can bring by example, by the power of example, the change in a small community that I serve, in my family, at my workplace. I think we have good leaders in every small community, even in every family. So that starting from small communities, we can change the whole world.
I love that. I love that. And now that takes me back to, because I'm going to hand over to Nina and Dr. Elena again, that takes me back to the initial premise when they asked us to close our eyes, begin to visualize, and put your hand in your heart in the new understanding and new concept of leadership, then the idea then comes to what kind of world do we want to see? Ask yourself that personal question. You don't have to share that with anyone, but ask yourself, what kind of environment do we want to create for ourselves? If we walk outside of the building and we see a piece of trash on the floor, do we wait for the janitors to come and get it, or do we pick it up and put it in the trash? Leadership is all about accountability. How well do you hold yourself accountable? I want you to think and let it get into your spirit, because that is how you influence the people around you. That is how we effect the change we want to see. Because we have so many leaders and nothing has shifted. So how do we have that mindset to shift our perspective of leadership? So that when we talk about leadership, we don't think about them, but we think of us, about you. So that your new definition of leadership is all about me. I'm talking you. What is your own perspective when you hear the word leadership again going forward? Which means that we expect that from this Summer Institute, you should be able to have a renewal of mind, to be able to hold yourself accountable, to be able to be responsible for yourself and the people around you. Because that is what leadership is all about being responsible, showing love and care. Because trust me, love supersedes everything. Everything. If you love yourself, you will love the people around you. And so I want to hand it over back to Dr. Elena and Nina, that as we look at the whole concept and the new idea of leadership, there's a reason why we are not going academic to look at the concept of leadership. We've done this for many years. We can define and use theories and different models of leadership. It hasn't worked. We've written dissertations on leadership many times. It still hasn't worked. So this new idea, concept of finding leadership within oneself is the way forward. Thank you.
They say that the way you learn on this planet Earth is through hardship. That you have a pain and you have to make a choice, and that's when you start to begin to feel your leadership. And I'm sure we all have choices that are hard to make, like every day almost. And so what are your values? If you can identify your values, yes? And you know that truth, love, justice, kindness is the answers to what you want to live by. When you have a problem and you have two sides, go this way or that way, you ask yourself in terms of the values, which one represents what is the better, the highest thing to do in life. And when you start to live that way, what happens, the world changes for you. Yeah, and the life becomes a pattern of showing you the way versus you forcing your way in the world. So begin to think, really, what is it you value? And work from that perspective. And I know we all have problems, we all suffer, we all are one humanity. But how do you lead forward? How do you make a good life? How do you feel inside of yourself is what's going to count. And as you walk forward in that positive frame, you will impact others and they will begin to experience what it is you want to share with them. And that's the new understanding. Yeah. Some of us will be leaders and famous. I think very interesting for me. Yeah, I've been doing the work 50 years. And that's why I got famous, because I did it so long. Deal. I just did my life, yeah? Then you can do your life. And then when you get older, you're gonna look back and you're gonna either feel good about your life or you're not gonna feel good. That's up to you, yeah? And that makes, you gotta believe that you're here for a purpose. The Native Americans said one good thing, many good things, but one that sticks out in my mind. They think whatever you do something important, think 7 generations ahead. What is the impact of your behavior? Yeah, and not an easy, but it gets you conscious. It makes you aware. Yeah, and that is a very good thing. But live by your values. Don't forget them, because otherwise you're going to get lost. And yeah, it's no fun being lost. And when one feels good about one's life, it's a much better feeling. And it doesn't have to be because who you are, it's how you feel inside yourself. So I turn over to Elaine and Sharon, yeah?
Well, some very, very wise things have been offered. And I really think, Dr. Samuel, you really led us to reflect, for which I'm most grateful. And a number of you said something that I want to come back to and connect it to what Nina just offered us as this powerful vision. Live your life, be who you are, and if you do it long enough,
Life works.
People will say, oh, that was a leader, and you will be, oh, it was a good life. But a number of you said, and Nina did too, we each have a pain. Connect to where your pain is. Because otherwise your values, you just kind of, this is my value, and this is my value. But our deepest held values come from where our pain is. That's all I wanted to add. When you connect to where your pain is, that leads you straight to your why, as Samuel said, to that value that really, really drives you. And that's as you live it and act it long enough, it will be a good life. And as Nina said, the more you align yourself with your value, I would say, the more you align yourself with the pain that brought you towards your value, the more the universe shows you the next step and the next step, and others, and the connections, and the path grows larger and larger and larger, and it includes more people, and you realize, oh, that was meant to be my path. Someday you look back there and you say, oh, that was meant to be my path. Many examples come to mind. When I first started to do my clinical practice, all of a sudden, people started to contact me about cases which I had never announced that I worked with. They were not on my website, they were nowhere. And I just didn't understand why people wanted me, I'm not going to cite now, but very specific conditions that were not on my website. But for reasons which I cannot explain, something resonated and I took on these cases. And these cases started to teach me all kinds of things. And some of the specific cases I think of showed up in my own personal life within a year after that. And apparently there were no coincidences. And then I look back now, 35 years later,
And I realized, okay, so I was being led in a very particular way, which finds me where I am today. And it was through pain, and through responding to that pain from my deepest soul, from the depths of my soul. And then through that, I became aware of certain values that really drive my life. And then it was a snowball effect after that, really. It was a snowball effect of the universe and many other souls working and teaching me and serving together. And then life unfolded. And now I have students who were my students 30 years ago, and they write messages to me about how their lives changed. And I think, well, your life changed, but my life changed when you came into my life too. And I can think of very clear ways in which you taught me as I was teaching you. So it was mutual and it was intended, but it does also, I come back to that. It does not go by avoiding the pain. Here comes the psychologist in me, but it's a truth. It goes through owning your pain. That's all.
Yeah. So there's a whole new study now on trauma work. And it's really important work because if you can release the trauma you have inside of yourself, then you can begin to build what's new. Otherwise, you bring your unhappiness into the situation and you discolor it. And if we really want to begin to birth a new understanding, we have to free ourselves of that trauma. And we have to explore it and release it as much as possible. And when you talk about new leadership, we're talking about your role in leadership, but there are words out there: collaboration, non-competition, regeneration. There are many words that describe how you can come together, but it's the feminine principle. That doesn't mean you have to be a woman. It's the feminine principle of birthing, of loving, embracing, nurturing, lifting up. And how do you do that as a leader? Yeah, it's a very different way of doing leadership. Not easy when we've been taught a different way. But we invite you, first of all, to start to think about your own identity, and then think about how you function in the world as best as possible.
Great. So I usually tell my students to create their own environment of life. And I usually like to use a metaphor or a philosophical thought process to say that God said is very sleepy. We know God doesn't sleep. So but God wants to sleep a bit, so God wants to put you in charge of life, of the world, and has given you the abilities and the powers to create your own small environment. What kind of world do you want to see? Who do you want to be in that space that you want to create? And that is the more reason why you cannot be a good leader if you are not able to define what your values are. I must be honest with you. If you are able to define your values, you will see how important it is for you to lead. So what I'm asking all of you, either you are writing it, or if you are processing it, or you are thinking about it, or you are visualizing it,
or you're rejecting it,
or even rejecting it.
I see faces.
The question is, can you define your values? What are you known for? Because I teach a course in conflict management. And I tell students all the time, the most difficult conflict to manage in all the concepts of conflict management is the conflict of values. Because people will not compromise their values. It's a very strong virtue that people have about their values. So any conflict around values goes on for a very long time, and it escalates into different areas of conflict. But since we are not talking about conflict management, let's still remain within the sphere of leadership. The question to you is, what is your value? And can you define it to yourself? If we call you right now, can you confidently say that this is my value and it's non-negotiable?
Not shocking.
Not shocking. A little bit.
Because, like Nina said, leadership is all about purpose. What is your purpose on earth? Why are you here in the first place? I love definitions because when you define a thing, it helps you to connect very well. What is your purpose? Why are you here? Why are you in this room right now? Is it because we invited you and you came? You still have a choice, you couldn't have come, but there was a reason why you are here. And we want you to walk away with the idea that the fact that you are present means that you are willing to lead. You are willing to have a different concept and a different mindset. And so there's so much problems in the world. We don't want to be contributors of those problems, but we want to be seen as problem solvers, people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of the unborn. Are you willing? The reason why I asked for us to identify historical leaders in leadership is because Nelson Mandela is dead and gone. We are talking about him. I shared with my friends yesterday on our road trip that, well, I'm originally from Ghana. I live in the United States. I'm able to teach different races in the United States because the folks like Martin Luther King and co. many years back sacrificed their life for the sake of people like us to be able to integrate into the system. The question I'm still asking you is that, what do you stand for as a leader? Are you able to say that, well, if I perish for the sake of the unborn, my life is fulfilled? Or is your life too precious for you that you are unwilling to sacrifice? Leadership is sacrificial. And there are many people. Yeah.
Okay. I say it looks like sacrifice, but if you want to do it, it's your giving.
It's your giving, absolutely. It's your giving. Absolutely.
In spiritual sources, you read about the mystery of sacrifice. You actually, sacrifice is not possible. Because when you sacrifice, what comes back to you is so much more than at the end
Absolutely.
of the day, there's no sacrifice.
Absolutely. So, and the word sacrifice, not in the term of being slain. No, I'm talking of you giving your time, giving your resources, giving your money, giving things that you solely dearly hold on to. Because as you will realize that one of the greatest weakness of humanity is attachment. When we become too attached to a thing, we suffer. And so if you want to be a leader, you will have to appreciate and understand that some things you must let go in order for you to be a blessing to other people. That is why the great leaders we mentioned will have left their families and left. That's the reason why you have left everything that you are supposed to do today. Some of you may be working on your capstones, your dissertations. You've left all of that to be here. It's another form of sacrifice because you want to see a better. So once again, hand it over back to you as we wrap up.
Okay, let's find out, are there any questions before we close this session? Is there
Yes.
anything else you would like to hear or learn about from us around leadership? Do you have a good sense of what we're talking about?
Yes, I have a question.
Please.
Because everything seems to be so nice. You presented everything in aligned colors. But my question is, you haven't mentioned Hitler, you haven't mentioned Stalin, you haven't mentioned Putin.
Putin, yes.
They were all leaders,
Good.
are leaders. Where do we place them in this scenario? Or shouldn't we consider them leaders?
That's right. From my perspective, we're talking.
And then in what category do we place
With them, yep.
I'm thinking about new leadership and how we can step into it. I'm not judging the leaderships around us, because they lead how many people
Because
don't.
one of the qualities,
Yeah.
of leadership is being able to get the masses
Mhm.
around you.
Mm-hmm.
And they were quite good at that.
At that, yes.
And influencing, perverting,
Mhm.
controlling one,
Absolutely.
manipulating. So isn't that one of the qualities of leadership?
Good question.
We are looking back to an earlier part of the conversation. I'm very glad that you are raising this question, and I definitely think we're going to come back to it tomorrow. Because in each stage of our growth and development, leadership looks different. And we'll talk more about that from a developmental perspective tomorrow. So in earlier stages in collective development, the development of humanity, leadership was understood as being able to use your force of character, force of conviction, in order to rally people around you and achieve a particular goal. And depending on the level of complexity of thinking, you will see only this much impact from your goal, or this much, or this much. So there is an evolutionary process that we're in now, which is the reason why leadership, as well as many other things, but leadership too, has to and is being redefined. So what is leadership now and going forward is not the leadership of Genghis Khan or any of the people that you mentioned, but in the earlier stages of the evolution of human thinking, that was seen as some kind of helpful leadership. And I think we'll come into more details on that for sure tomorrow when we take a closer developmental scrutiny of how leadership, understanding of leadership, and the values and the worldviews behind leadership actually evolve. And which is why it is so critical, the conversation we had today, which was more open-ended and reflective, inviting everybody to really get a feel that things are being redefined and to do it within ourselves, within our own experience, and share with each other. This was a more open-ended reflection. And tomorrow we can take that and organize it into some clarity of knowledge and understanding that gives us clear frames of reference, because that is also part of leadership, to have clear frames of reference. So I wanted to thank you for that question, for raising it.
So you understand, the earth is evolving and the consciousness is evolving, and we need to prepare ourselves for what that can be. We don't want so much to be pointing out what's not working anymore, but how do we build a better concept of leadership? And we need to support that in all of us so that we feel we have a direction to go to.
Thank you, Ramona.
Ramona,
So you think it's not working anymore?
I think it's fallen apart, many things.
Yeah, but if you look around, all the extremist parties that have gone through
Around the world.
I think for some reason, they are still speaking the language of the people
past.
of the past, yes. So
Yeah.
I think it's still working, whether we like it or not, to
Theoretically, 10% of the world, if they agree on a thought, that thought becomes reality. So let us work towards what we want. Versus we're not gonna know.
Exactly.
Right?
Let's remember our childhood stories. Which one of you hasn't read childhood stories where the monster that gets slain becomes the most scary when they thrash and they throw out fire just as they are dying? So there is something very intense in this moment. You're right. Very intense. The rise of ugliness right now is not to be sugarcoated. But we have to, and I think that's where we come to a more focused conversation on the knowledge, the evolutionary developmental knowledge that can help us see what is actually happening. Why is all this ugliness gathering momentum right now? Which it is. It actually is. What is happening? And if we understand what is happening, how do we navigate it? Full conscious awareness and intention, and without sugarcoating or being naive.
The people in the world are rallying now. They're standing up to have a voice. You see it all across the world, but coming out. They just don't know yet what they want, but they know they don't want what they see.
Absolutely.
That then, we have to prepare as an educator for what can come. And we have to help our young people understand that it's their world. And they shouldn't imitate what was. They should begin to design what can be.
Yeah. And I want to add to Annamaria's question is a very important question. Now, the reason it's important is because we just talked about leadership as influence. And your influence based on your virtues will determine the kind of leader you are and the kind of world you want to see. Because you can either influence the world negatively or positively. And so that's why I have a question. I'm sure tomorrow Dr. Elena will go deeper into it. But that's a very important question because I usually when I'm starting a leadership class with my students, I always ask them, I'm surprised you even said that. I always ask, is Adolf Hitler a leader? And almost everyone in the class will say no. And I'll tell them I disagree with you because if you can influence, you are a leader. But what kind of influence are we bringing to the world? So every single one of us sitting here, we have influence one way or the other over some people in our lives. I have influence over my wife and my children. You have influence over your family. What kind of influence are we bringing to our world? If we look at all the virtues and all the characteristics and everything that Nina and Elena have spoken about, and we look at the positive perspective of those influence, trust me, we will be able to influence the world. And one more thing, when we have leaders, when we are students, when we have built capacity of ourselves, I encourage you, get involved in politics. Decisions are made in politics. If you don't participate in the political process, choices and decisions will be made for you by people with bad virtues, immoral characters. But if you are involved in the process, because you cannot lead from afar, you have to be part of the process. And so I'm sure tomorrow we will dive deeper into the developmental process by Dr. Elena, and we will be able to appreciate and put all the pieces together. But good conversation. I thought it's great conversation, bringing all the pieces back.
Hear from you. Do you like this way of working?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I want to know. Because most important is our building of relationships
Yes.
and knowing each other in this.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Cool.
Very good.
Awesome.
We act. These patterns of behavior are included in this general concept of culture. Then Raymond Williams, and you can see that early on in 1983 comes with this definition. He says that besides the patterns, culture is one of the most difficult Yeah, one of the 2 or 3 most complicated words in the English language. Why complicated? Because we all feel we know it, but we cannot define it very well. It's difficult to define it. Anyway, Geert Hofstede says that this culture is like a computer program. It is ingrained in our feelings, in our thoughts, in the way we think and behave. So it's the programming of the mind. And you have a definition here, quite complex, but again, it's based on the same patterns of thinking, feeling, and potential acting. And they say that every person carries within him or herself those patterns. And what is more important, he says that they are acquired in early childhood. So we somehow are born with this and they develop the way we grow up and we continue developing. And each and every person has them and they change in time due to various circumstances and factors. So the patterns mentioned usually develop through interactions. And where do we have these interactions? In social environment and among the groups of individuals that we have contacts with. So remember, we go back to the context. We mentioned culture, communication, context, and power, those 4 elements. So context, essential, and social environment, you see that the evolution starts from family and then neighborhood and school and youth groups. And then moving on, you have the circle of friends. You have the context in which you work, working place, and all those groups that somehow influence your behavior. So culture normally is a collective experience. And it grows and develops in this collectivity. Now, another definition that is important says that culture, it's Singer, the one that says this, is a pattern of learned group-related perceptions, including verbal and non-verbal language. So, language, culture, communication, and then you have values and symbols and everything. So, culture, if we start from this pattern here, means perceptions and values. Contextual, because we need a context. And emotions, we haven't yet mentioned emotions. Why are emotions important? Because normally, through the things that we communicate, we somehow send messages and express feelings. And these feelings take us to this concept, which is important in cultural studies, embodied ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism can be something positive, and it is positive if it's not taken to an exaggerated step. So as long as we behave in a normal way and we preserve the limits, this embodied ethnocentrism is the feelings that we have, the emotions, feeling comfortable among the people and familiar in the spaces and with the people that we are familiar with those that we share the same values, the same ideas, the same thoughts, in our cultural surroundings. The moment we exaggerate this feeling of feeling good among the people that we belong to, and we start to ignore the others, then ethnocentrism becomes something else, something negative, because power is the one that dictates you. And this happens normally in a multicultural society where you have a dominant culture that somehow disregards the minorities. Let's hope we do not feel that, we do not behave in that way. So this embodied ethnocentrism is normal and we all go through it. And normally, based on this, the stronger your identification with the values and behaviors and everything you have, the stronger that feeling, the more difficult it becomes to you to adjust in a different kind of context. And here we can speak about the cultural shock that so many people might experience when they change contexts that are different from their own. So if we are to summarize culture, you have those elements, learned patterns, contextual, symbolic patterns, and heterogeneous, dynamic, and the site of contestation because power is there to control everything. Now, if we move to communication, communication normally occurs when someone attributes meaning because we have to understand each other. If we do not understand each other, then there is no communication. I can talk to myself in front of the mirror, but that is internal monologue, or external if you want, but I do not communicate. So we have to understand the message. And it is said that it's a symbolic process whereby reality is produced, contained, prepared, and transformed. Why? Because language is not in itself. It comes from somewhere and it goes somewhere. And in the process of communicating and exchanging ideas, the reality does not remain the same. Whether we agree or disagree with the others, there is a certain change that happens. And there are three perspectives from which we can analyze communication. From the social science perspective, we're interested in the actors, all those participants, the components of communication, meaning the sender, the receiver, the message, everything. There are variables involved, and these are essential because they influence communication, like gender, like the nature of the relationship, and distance in this case is essential because people in long-term relationships, people that know each other, communicate in a certain way. People they have recently met communicate in a different way. Men and women, again, their communication differs a lot, and the way they organize in their mind the speech. Then, if we move on to the interpretive perspective, we speak about the symbolic nature of communication. We speak about language that uses words. Words are considered symbols, signs, so language is a semiotic system. We transmit a message, but communication happens if people use the same message and understand the message and the code. If I use English and you do not understand English, then communication does not happen. We have to use the same code, the same system in order to make things proper. And then again, communication can be verbal, can be non-verbal, because all the gestures, all the facial expression, everything suggests something. And through all these elements, we communicate certain things. I won't get into details with the sign and the semiotic system. You all know such things. Well, the idea is that besides this system, there is something else in the same pattern of interpretation. The idea, and this is pragmatics that tells us, because normally we know that A equals something else as the signifier, and the signified, when I say dog, you have something in your mind. When I say tree, you have that thing in your mind. While pragmatics comes and tells us that something can mean something, but for different people, it could mean different things. Okay, so it's no longer a dyadic relationship, it's a triadic one. What means to you? And I invite you to think about this simple sentence, I love you. What could it mean? Love. Well, I have. Yes, I have selected certain options. Obviously, the context can change, but I love you could mean I like to have a good time with you tonight. Just imagine two partners, okay? I love you could mean I feel guilty about something, okay? And I say, I love you, but you know, I won't reveal everything. Or I need you to do me a favor. Sometimes we say this and the implication is different. Or I have a good time when I'm with you, or I want to spend the rest of my life or just the next few hours with you. So it could mean various things for different people depending on the context. Okay? So this could happen. So communication is complex. The same thing happens in the case of culture, but we'll see when we put them together. From a critical perspective, Yeah, and this brings us closer to the idea of power, because power is still important even if we do not want to recognize, and we want to treat everything from the same level, equal terms. Well, in an ideal society, maybe, but nowadays, let's be honest, there is no equality. So there are plenty of social, societal processes that influence the communication. And let's think about history. You have Stefan here. He's an expert in history. History is written by the people in power. The discourse is written by the ones that are there and control everything. And we are controlled how to think, what to think, and how to interpret things. Yes, things change, and then we go back and we say, okay, that was wrong. It should have been different. But the reality will tell us only later in time how things change and who has the right to say, well, we can challenge the reality, that's for sure, but I don't know what really happens. So if we are to summarize communication, again, we have the components, we have the symbolic process, and we have the power dynamics that are inevitably there. Now, the relationship between culture and communication is a complex one, and I was thinking, which should I start with? Does culture influence communication, or does communication influence culture? You know that in linguistics, there are two great ideas, if you want, traditions. One would be the linguistic relativism, that is Sapir and Wolf thesis. They say that language is the one that controls everything and is the one that creates the reality. And according to the patterns of the language, we see the reality in a certain way. And then we have language universalism, that comes and a bit contradicts the Sapir and Wolf hypothesis, and they say that no way, people are born with a certain kind of thinking, something cognitive there, and they have the same perceptions. So the surroundings, the context influences the way we use the language and we create the language. So not knowing which one to choose, normally I would go for the second one. Anyway, I started with culture influencing communication, first of all. And there are two frameworks, quite important, I would say, and you will see that they were developed by anthropologists in 1961 and then by social psychologist Hofstede in 1984, and they are based on cultural values. We start from culture. Now, cultural values, you have a kind of definition here, the worldview of a cultural group, how we see and how we feel, and the way in which we perceive reality. Now, these cultural values are the ones that dictate the way in which we address the world and the things around us. And they say that intercultural conflicts normally arise because we do not always respect the values, or we do not value exactly the same things that other people value. Now, I will show you the first framework. It's Graham and Stolbeck value orientation, and they focus on 5 main directions: human nature, relationship between humans and nature, relationship between humans, preferred personality, and time orientation. And according to these values that were analyzed, they came with these groups, this kind of, let's say, values that define certain groups of people. You have basically good, a mixture of good and evil, and basically evil. If we think about legal practices, it's obvious because there are countries in which, if you are basically good, you try to reform convicts, to forget, somehow, I don't know, do not come with too harsh punishments. You see them in a brighter kind of color. And if you're basically evil, you punish everything and you do not accept such. Then the relationship between humans and nature, humans dominate. When we, just for example, I thought about environmental issues or birth control. Okay, there is the dispute with the abortion and everything, On the one hand, humans dominate, you have the choice, you can do whatever you choose with your body and the way you behave. Nature dominates, you have no say in this, in certain countries, certain groups, and somewhere in between, and so on and so forth. You have individual, meaning individualism. Normally Europeans are said to be individualistic, but you have group-oriented. Yeah, think about Japan, think about Asian countries where the group is more important and the connections between people and so on. Preferred personality, doing, acting, yeah, growing, or even being those that feel a lot, and so on. And I won't spend much time. The second one, yeah, the second framework, Hofstede, he speaks about 4 directions, not 5, yeah, power distance, and here you have the countries actually, and the way they see things. Low power distance, yeah, less hierarchy is better in this case, Denmark, yeah, New Zealand. High power distance, India, Mexico. Femininity versus masculinity, the values that are important for people, yeah, gender-specific roles are fewer in the case of femininity. They value life, they value support, and so on. Masculinity, a different idea. And again, countries that are interested and act towards this. Then you have uncertainty avoidance. And the last one, long-term, short-term orientation. So you can check all of this if you want and if you are interested. Now, all these elements, maybe we are familiar with, maybe not, and we have just learned them. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that these are general guidelines. And as everywhere, there are limitations to these frameworks. Why? Because they tend to essentialize things. They say that if you consider that a group of people acts in that way, it means that each and every individual in that group should act that way. And let's be honest, we are not identical. So the feelings that we have, the values that we have may be more or less the same, but the strength, the power that involved and how deep we feel about a thing or about the other, there is a difference. So we cannot level individuals, and we should accept that there is always a difference between the way we behave, we act, and we see things. So if we are to use those frameworks, we are in danger of, stereotyping too much and considering that these are the exact rules that we should think of, which is wrong. We should not do that, okay? We should accept that there are differences between groups, yeah, cultural groups, but we should not necessarily stick to them in specific terms. Now, how communication influences culture. Obviously, culture is enacted through and it's influenced by the way in which we communicate, okay? We speak, we express our feelings, we act in certain ways that obviously suggest our cultural values and beliefs. And normally communication also helps us resist the influence if we feel that the influence is not the desired one. Now, just a few words about context. When we speak about context, we do not necessarily have in mind only the physical context. Think about the actors, all the people involved, yeah, in a situation. Think about social, political, economic, historical, everything. So all these elements influence context, and context is the one that dictates even communication or the way we address things. And then you have power, even if we do not always want to accept it or, admit it. Power is pervasive in communication and in interaction between people, and it's the one that dictates the discourse that we use. Anyway, power, again, is dynamic because history has demonstrated so many times that it's a cyclic process, and it changes, and the people in power today might disappear the next day, and then the discourse changes, Yeah, we come from a communist country. We celebrated the economy of our country, which was 100% perfect, irrespective of the fact that no one has anything to eat. But this was what we pretended, and we knew the discourse. Now we are in democracy. We realize that it was a lie, and we admit it. Well, we don't know what comes next, and we will adjust to what comes after. So, my presentation is getting to an end, and as food for thought, I was thinking that you should think which elements of your cultural identity might be most difficult for you to preserve if you were supposed to change the context. And to think whether cultural identity can be, I don't know, changed, or whether you can lose it, or is something that sticks with you due to the fact that we said that it's like a programming of the mind, and then it's there whether we like it or not, and we carry with us elements that will define us in the future, and whether you feel open to, I don't know, changing your traits, your feelings, your attitudes, if it's necessary, or you will try to challenge, resist, and try to impose your own. So, thank you for listening to me, and I'm now inviting Luminita to continue.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Luminita Todea. I work in this beautiful university and my perspective comes from the point of view of the teacher of English. You were mentioning leadership values, issues related to leadership in the morning. So I would say that as a teacher of English, as an educator, you need to become a leader. And leadership comes with experience, from my perspective, as in more than I started teaching last century, right? Some decades later, I come to realize that, I once was one kind of teacher, but now with experience and with everything involved, things just get better and better. I could say that. And the best thing of all, you know what that is? It's all the communication, the understanding, the empathy that pops out in different connections episodes we have with our students. And I do not want to boast about it, but I have to share this feeling of well-being. The moment when I get a message, and then I'm sure you were in those situations in which you got those very positive messages from your loved ones. So in my case, it was receiving positive messages from my students, moments when I realized that I really need those nice words and nice feelings to come in. Right, so in the spirit of summertime and traveling, I'm inviting you to bear with me for a short presentation on ethnic identity and cultural stereotypes in idiomatic expression toward an inclusive language use. And on the whatever right or left side of my slide, there I have included a photo. I took a photo from here. And I'm inviting you to guess where it was taken. Not the message. We could share what the message of the photo is, but can you imagine a city in Europe where you can come across this beautiful statue? Yeah. Europe. So it's Rotterdam. In front of the central station in Rotterdam, you would come across this huge, overwhelming statue. And what it represents is an artwork, both named moments contained, 2022-2023, It is a 4 meter tall bronze statue of a young woman, they say an ordinary girl, in tracksuit bottoms and trainers, created by British artist Thomas J. Price with Caribbean roots. And what this statue is about, the feeling of being put away as the other. The woman looks stoic at first glance, but the imprint of her knuckles in her pant pockets show that she is actually not as casual as she appears. The image shows that she is strong and confident, but vulnerable at the same time.
Mm.
Am I right or am I right?
You are right.
Yeah. You're yeah. So moving on from Rotterdam to some other beautiful place in Europe, again, this time a different statue of, you do recognize, the leader, the spiritual leader of India is Mahatma Gandhi, right? Apostle of peace and non-violence, the statue is called. And where is this situated? Anything? Where? No, Europe again, still Europe. Not France, yeah, but it is connected somehow with immigration, immigrants, the Mediterranean Sea, a beautiful harbor in Italy, Brindisi. So in the port of Brindisi, which is called the Port of Peace, they have included this beautiful statue, representative statue of Mahatma Gandhi, and it was placed in the summer of 2024, and it is a gift from Italy to the city of Brindisi, and a copy of the statue that India also gave to the city of Hiroshima, Japan. Gandhi's historical importance to Brindisi dates back to December 1931, when he, after participating in the second conference on the India question in London, decided to change his return route to India by stopping in the port city. His greeting on leaving Brindisi with the white handkerchief remains an image linked to the iconography of the city's contemporary history. Right. Okay, and I will move on to this. Yeah, Mahatma, what, no, what? Hakuna Matata, kind of feeling, yeah, isn't it there? Okay, right. Again, my photo, yeah, I'm really, yeah, happy that I could take this beautiful photo somewhere again. Doesn't really matter where. I'm inviting you to imagine an episode, the story behind the photo. So this is the place, yeah? The harbor, charming city somewhere in the south part of whatever, Mediterranean Sea again. And people, tourists walking on the piers. I am one of the protagonists of the story. And talking about cultural interference and communication, you can imagine myself just walking around that beautiful place, taking photos of each and every stone and pebble. And at one point, there were two ladies who approached me and asked me if I know English. And I said, yes, I guess I know a little bit of it. And they said, okay, can you tell me where we can take the boat to travel from this place to wherever? Why? Because they had a reservation at 9 o'clock to take a boat from the harbor to whatever, sail around. And I went to a nice group of inhabitants of the place. Of course, they were Italians, right? And asked them if they could help me to intermediate the communication between me and those two ladies about the 9 o'clock boat. You know what answer I got from the Italian press. What time does what time does the boat leave the harbor? La barca va alla 9 o 9:30. So the boat might leave at 9 or 9:30. Is my Italian good enough, right? Thank you. Okay, so 9 or 9:30. Yeah, 9:30. Okay, so for our Romanian side, it's not an issue. But for the Romanian, for the Australian ladies, because the two ladies, the tourists were from Australia, they were like a little bit puzzled. Is it 9 o'clock or is it 9:30? And I was, don't worry, the boat will come by the end of the harbor somewhere. If it's 9 or 9:30, it doesn't. Just be there, watch for the small boat. And one of them was very nice, one of the interlocutors, and she told, okay, so you say 9 or 9:30 as we say Bali time, yeah. And from this point of view, I was, okay. I knew about Manana time, the island time, but I didn't really know about the Bali time, yeah, which is related to relaxed, unhurried approach to life. And when the lady told me Bali time, I told to the Italian guys, la dolce vita, la dolce far niente. And my daughter was accompanying me, and she was, Mom, are you making them lazy? No, it's not about laziness. It's about enjoying a quiet, beautiful summer morning, right? La dolce vita. Right. So, okay. Talking about inclusive language in an informal, traveling, holiday-like context, if we say that it's Bali time, it could be rather humorous, not even ironical or sarcastic, right? But in an inclusive, as an inclusive alternative, a more formal, polite way of saying the same expression would be, we are working on a flexible schedule. And I'm sure you have your moments of flexibility in your lives without any regrets. I know that for myself. Right. So I'm moving on towards different expressions, and I'm inviting you to read out the text and just tell me the idiom. So it's an expression, idiomatic saying. Of course, that is. Thank you, Andrea, for that, right? Do as the Romans do. And it's something, an invitation for all of you in the room. So when in Maramuresh, just enjoy this Maramuresh spirit, right? Okay, the next one, and this is my favorite expression, and I will move on to a more serious statement. So considering a person's origin and upbringing strongly shape who they are, even when they leave that place. Anyone? So, is this one? Yeah, I'm sure you all know the expression. You can take the girl out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the girl, Arizona, the South, whatever, right? It can go different ways. Similar expressions are the others, right? Similar and not so, if you were to take the exact symbolic of that. Right, so moving on, language is a powerful carrier of culture, identity, and historical memory, and idiomatic expression often contain embedded cultural assumptions, including ethnic references that reflect long-standing stereotypes. When communication is at its best, it creates bridges to share knowledge and expand our understanding of the world at any level. In order to become successful communicators across languages and cultures, one must gain a better understanding of the people's norms of interaction and values from a cultural point of view as well. I have included some examples of inclusive language of ethnonyms. The focus is on ethnonyms, so words related to ethnicities, in a pejorative and politically correct including the pejorative and politically correct alternatives. I'm sure you are all familiar with this alternation of terms. And I would like to move on towards two instances that I came across regarding harmful language in the news. At one point, I came across an article which is called, so considering the first picture, yeah, for the I'm sure you are familiar with Agatha Christie's novels. And the time when I read the story, the book, the title was different. I'm inviting the Romanian colleagues and students to remember the original Romanian title. If you were to check for the same title these days, it's a similar translation of their word and their word nine, or none. Okay, so indeed, later on, indeed, but the time when I was a kid and I wrote the novel had a totally different title, right? So the article published by The Guardian in 2023 informs the readers about the fact that several Agatha Christie's novels have been edited to remove potentially offensive language, including insults and references to ethnicities. The newspaper reports that the editor cut references to ethnicity, such as describing a character as Black, Jewish, or Gypsy, remove terms such as Oriental or the N-word, replace the word natives with the word local. Was first published, UK dropped the title and the N-words in the 1980s. Even the island of the Negro being replaced, as well as the American edition with the soldier's island. In the United States, the book was first published as 10 Little Indians in 1939, and then renamed There Were None Left. However, the original title was still used in France until 2020, when an article reported that the N-word would be erased from the French edition of the novel, and it would be re-entitled similarly, They Were 10, due to sensible decision of the writer's grandson. Considering the second instance related to media, it refers to, so it's football, English Football Association, Manchester United players, whoever, who had a great moment and he was congratulated by one of his colleagues and he replied back in a post, "Gracias, Negrito." Yeah. And what happened after that post was that he was fined and banned not to play for 3 whatever events later. And this expression might sound offensive due to racial connotations, or it could have an acceptable interpretation in other contexts, speaking about context that my colleague has already underlined. The meaning of the Spanish word negrito implies discrimination, a demeaning slur directed to people. However, in Spanish, the suffix ito, ita, is used to create a diminutive word. And this diminutive form is a kind of term of endearment in South America and the Caribbeans, a harmless expression in Latin America to affectionately be addressed to a loved one or a close friend. It is also used to describe someone with dark hair, not just dark skin, as well as a synonym for the word mate. Although the English Football Association acknowledged the fact that the post constituted a contravention because it included reference, whether direct or indirect, to ethnic origin, the Uruguayan Academy of Letters, an association of academics and experts on the use of the Spanish language, has already described the sanction as an example of a prejudiced act against the culture and the way of life of the Uruguayan people. So the truth is somewhere in between, right? Even if when we were to consider inclusive language. Right. And moving towards understanding ethnic reference related to idioms, these expressions have long intrigued linguists with a well-established tradition of research. While native speakers often use them instinctively, non-native speakers frequently find them challenging to master. And I am inviting you to pay attention to a selection of Dutch reference idioms in English. These idiomatic expressions, Dutch and later on French reference idioms in English, are based on the common historical background of the countries, their political heritage, shipping and trading legacy. They are mostly used in informal spoken language. And in some cases, when they are used in a humorous way, it is difficult to establish a clear distinction between humor and irony. But they may also describe people in a critical way by exposing their real or supposed faults or lack of qualities. When we go Dutch, we know that in Romanian we don't go Dutch, but we go. There is another nation involved in Romanian. German way, yeah. I don't know about how you say when we pay our own share, if you have a similar expression with a certain nationality involved, a certain ethnicity. Yeah, so when we pay our own share of the bill, to be in Dutch means to be in trouble or in someone's disfavor. If you are in Dutch with someone, you have done something to upset them or cause problems. Some scholars also suggest that it could stem from the Dutch word Dutch. Is it Dutch? Meaning German? I'm not sure, though this is less certain. Or other expressions as double Dutch, which can means gibberish, hard to understand, or nonsense. The term was used humorously or pejoratively to describe that something is complicated, unintelligible, or overly complex, and so on and so forth. Some idioms related to the supposed great fondness of the Dutch for alcohol. I'm not sure about this stereotype. How I can why I chose this, because we do have dear friends who live in the Netherlands, and I didn't really find any of those things as stereotypes, as language expressions in my connection, our connection to those people from the Netherlands, right? So it's again a matter of the perspective and the long history of rivalry and abilities between the English and the Dutch throughout the 17th and the 18th and the 19th century, and how contemporary these expressions are in modern language. A Dutch headache is, of course, it refers to hangover after a headache. A Dutch bargain refers to a deal or an agreement made under the influence of alcohol. But in a business context, a Dutch sandwich defines a tax avoidance strategy used by multinational corporations to minimize corporate tax obligation by routing profits through Dutch subsidiaries. Right, and here I have included 3 images. Nice, very colorful indeed, again, right? So the first, what do you think the first represents? Which one of them? It is a Dutch baby, yeah, because you are familiar with the fluffy pancake baked in the oven. What about this one? It's the, which of them? Which one? Sorry? Just take a pick, it doesn't matter. Dutch cousin. It could be Dutch cousin, but actually Dutch cousin implies close friends or 2 or more people whose only relation to each other is that they have slept with the same person. That's who the Dutch cousins are, right? But it is in the family, still in the family. So this is the Dutch wife, right? So it's the pillow or the hot water bottle that people keep to keep them warm at night. You can imagine the rain, cold nights in the Netherlands. And Of course, this is a Dutch cap, but it's not a Dutch cap because it looks like a cap, but the Dutch cap, it refers to the contraception device, which is called a diaphragm. Oh. And we move on to French. Right. French used in English slang to refer to things associated to sexual immorality, reflecting long-standing Anglo-French cultural rivalry and stereotypes. The French letter, a condom, the French disease, syphilis, but the English call it the French disease, the French called it the Neapolitan disease, and the Russian called it the, who did they fight with across centuries? Polish, yeah, Prussian Polish disease, right? Right, so the cultural implication, and it is that this was a form of blame shifting through naming, reflecting national rivalries and xenophobia, right? So diseases were named after foreign enemies to deflect humiliation. French kiss, we know that is, French novel, and so on and so forth. Still, pardon my French or excuse my French, right? Okay. Goodbye. Promotive inclusive language use in communication. From the perspective of cultural sensitivity, most of this expression originated in colonial, military, or trade contexts, where power dynamics shaped how different cultures were perceived and represented, often reflecting ethnocentric or derogatory stereotypes. Inclusive language demonstrates a conscious respect for cultural diversity and acknowledges the dynamic nature of identity. When we move away from these ethnically charged metaphors or racially coded idioms, we affirm the value and dignity of all cultural groups by resisting linguistic patterns that reduce them to caricature or stereotypes. Many of the phrases considered problematic, such as Dutch courage or French live or Irish goodbye, which is similar to the Irish goodbye, are not culturally insensitive, but still euphemistic, and they could be replaced by more inclusive language, descriptive language, as alcohol-induced confidence or living without saying goodbye, which lead to clarity, which that is important in professional or instructional context, where ambiguity can lead to misunderstanding or misinformation. So the speaker's intentions, nuances, and context, as well as their cultural awareness, are important components in effective communication. And I don't know why we as a nation, I don't know, I'm a mom. I had my small kids once, but I was a kid myself some time ago. So, and you know, when kids are, I mean, we have young kids, we always tell them, do not speak to strangers. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this too. Yeah, do not speak to strangers, do not speak to strangers. And indeed, and at one point later on in your life, you realize that's quite a big lie. Why? I mean, not all strangers, not all foreigners are that dangerous or different from us. And not the older, the wiser I get in my case, the more I notice how similar we are as people. All around the places I go, I am struck by similarities, not so much of differences anymore. Yeah. And when it comes to the time when I was a kid, I somehow regret the fact that I really took that kind of warning word by word, do not speak to strangers. Oh, right. So people's education about different culture and social norms has the ability to exhibit more of a lasting impact than bans and fines, as I have already mentioned. So in conclusion, this shift aligns with broader efforts to challenge stereotypes and foster equity, diversity, and inclusion practices in society at large. Thank you.
I'm wondering what it has to do with leadership. It's because, well, the obvious leadership, from my perspective, it's a manipulation, whether you view it as a negative thing or a positive thing. Yeah. And I did not want to go into the aspects of how leaders manipulate. So we're going to talk a little bit about just light-hearted aspects, that is, colors and how they influence us as individuals in our shopping behavior. Someone said shopping before the break, and in our attitude towards brands and buying and so on. And please be kind to me and let me sit, because I'm in a little bit of a discomfort. I'm moving slowly to save energy. So yeah, if you've ever wondered why McDonald's chose red and yellow, or why almost all social media platforms use blue, or maybe you've wondered why you feel hungry when you see the Coca-Cola logo, or why you feel peaceful when you walk into a Starbucks. Maybe you've wondered why pale blue and pale green are used in hospital settings. Why not red? Why not purple? Why not orange? Yeah. Well, the answer is in your brain, specifically in how it processes colors. And yes, the world's most successful brands have been using these secret codes to influence your decisions for decades. Well, our decisions, basically decades. Color psychology is an emerging science. Yeah, it studies the ways in which color impacts our emotions, our mood, our perceptions, and even our buying decisions. And it's true, marketeers use colors to manipulate consumers, to manipulate us. I'd really like to hear your input. Oh, please.
Interesting on blue.
Yeah. Yes. Just to give you an idea in terms of historical background, there was an experiment, quite a famous experiment, that changed everything in terms of color use and color and the manipulation through colors. In 1966, there was a psychologist, his name was Robert Gerard, and he conducted what at that time was considered a groundbreaking experiment. And he basically exposed volunteers to red and blue lights while measuring their psychological responses. And the result was striking. At that time, maybe not so striking for us at this time, because we're quite familiar with some of these things. Red was discovered, it increased blood pressure, it increased heart rate and brain activity, while red light did this. While blue light decreased blood pressure, muscle relaxation, and it induced mental calm. This study actually demonstrated what ancient cultures already knew, that colors have a direct impact on our mental and emotional state. But there is an interesting part to it. This impact is automatic and unconscious. Your brain reacts to colors before you realize it. And yes, there is a little bit of science behind colors. When you perceive a color, you're not just you don't just see it. Yeah, your brain activates a cascade of processes, and just grab that. Oh, too much, too far. Wait, go back. And you draw of what? Okay. Maybe. Oh. Let's see. There. Yes. So in terms of the visual processing, yeah, basically your visual cortex interprets the wavelengths. That's what's happening. In terms of emotional activation, your limbic system generates emotional responses, and then you have hormonal responses. Your body releases specific hormones, and then your behavior changes. You act upon these responses. Yeah. The surprising fact is that it doesn't move by itself, does it? No. Okay. This entire process lasts less than 90 seconds. And 62 to 90% of that first impression is based solely on color. Your brain, let's see. Yeah, your brain has an emotional database. So this whole processing thing, it's called the chromatic memory phenomenon, yeah? And as I was saying, your brain has an emotional database associated with each color because, yeah, we've learned it throughout the evolution of humanity. And it's built through evolutionary experiences. Take, for instance, red, yeah? The first thing that pops to our head is that red means orange. Danger, sorry. It has to do with it also makes you think of blood. Yeah. Also, in terms of evolutionary experiences, green equals nature equals safety. Yeah. And then there are cultural associations. Yeah. White, for instance, means purity in the West, but it has to in the Asia, for instance, it's related to mourning. So different. Yeah. And then it also comes down to personal experience. Maybe, I don't know, the blue of your childhood room calms you still at this moment. Yeah, red makes you hungry, blue calms you, while yellow gives you a pick-me-up vibe. Color psychology, which basically leverages on the colors to produce a certain effect, can influence 85% of consumers and customers' purchasing decisions we're going back to. And as a marketing tool, color psychology has long been quite a powerful tool. And as I was saying in the beginning, merchandisers do use different colors to trigger emotions needed to get customers to buy stuff. Okay. So before continuing and going into the details of a few colors, a few basic colors, at the end of this, hopefully, if I summon the gods of technology to be on my side, there will be a quiz. So maybe those of you working in education are familiar with Kahoot. Kahoot. Okay, so hopefully it will work. Yeah. Okay. This is that one. Yeah. Okay. So color can often determine a consumer's first impression of a brand or a product. And consumers attach feelings they have about certain colors. Yeah, for instance, if you see black, you're thinking luxurious, in terms of products. In turn, those color associations do influence the product perception, our perception of the specific brand. And color psychology plays a role, quite a major role, in how consumers make decisions and evaluate brands. So we have up to 90% of an initial impression that comes from color. And also color can increase brand awareness and recognition by 80%, which is really high. And another quite high number, quite a high percentage. 93% of consumers make purchasing decisions based on visuals alone. So that's us all. Yeah. So we will break down the colors, as I was saying. We'll start with there it is. There it is, there it is. All right. So blue seems to be the world's favorite color, with 50% of men and 35% of women ranking it as their top choice. And brands feel the same way. This calming tone is the most popular logo color, with 33 of the top brands featuring it in their logo. Blue brings up feelings of security, strength, wisdom, and trust. Social media companies like Facebook and Twitter frequently choose blue to make them appear dependable, a crucial trait for businesses that store a ton of user data. So, yeah. On the other hand, blue also has negative connotations. There are few blue foods in nature, so the color suppresses our appetite. It can also convey feelings of coldness and unfriendliness. The Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is an example that you can see over there of a logo that uses blue in both its name and in its branding. As a health insurance company, they have to balance collecting personal data alongside providing quality services. Its color scheme signals to its customers that they can trust and rely upon the company when making important decisions. Yeah, so for to have purple, which symbolizes royalty and superiority. In the Roman Empire, for instance, high-ranking officials wore Tyrian purple, which cost more than gold at that time. Queen Elizabeth I even banned anyone outside the royal family from wearing purple. Due to these ancient associations, purple generates sort of a wise, wealthy, and sophisticated aura. Brands can use the color to signal a superior service or product or experience. But purple can also represent decadence and also moodiness and excess. So, yeah, merchandisers should take care in order to strike balance between and when using this color. So since purple has a more feminine association, Hallmark, now I don't know how many of you know Hallmark, I think it's Diva at this point, yeah. It uses tone as a nod to its predominantly feminine audience. The TV channel also leverages on the color to convey its unique offering of movies. Only a few brands use purple, by the way, so the color can make companies stand out. Orange. Yeah, this is quite a bright color. It conveys confidence, it conveys creativity, and also courage. And because of its fun nature, it works well with non-corporate brands. Orange also produces a warm feeling since it's associated with the sun. Yet the color also has some not so sunny connotations. It can generate feelings of frustration, deprivation, even sluggishness. It may come across as immature and even ignorant. In fact, 29% of people rank orange as their least favorite color. And, well, you can think in terms of differences between Hermes and Cheetos. Probably familiar with these two brands. And you have an example there, Nickelodeon, yeah, their iconic splat, which is one of the most well-known orange logos. Since orange drums up feelings of creativity and even maturity, it matches their wacky programming and quirky branding. So, I mean, only a company with an orange aesthetic could house shows like SpongeBob SquarePants, for instance. Yeah. Red. Well, with red, yeah, this is a powerful color. And it's associated with excitement, with energy, with power, with fearlessness. and fashion. In sales, call to action buttons use red to empower shoppers to basically act, because it exudes a sense of urgency. Yeah? Red can also have a physical impact. The color makes people hungry, apparently. And as I said in the beginning, makes blood pressure higher. However, red can foster negative feelings just as powerfully. It represents anger, warnings of danger, defiance, aggression, even pain. Red police lights warn drivers to pull over, while stop signs force drivers to halt. Disney's Inside Out movie, you know the Inside Out movie?
The one about feelings.
The one about feelings, yes. It represents anger as a fiery red creature. Those of you who have kids maybe are more familiar with it. In branding, red works when used in the right context. Yeah? For example, Coca-Cola. Yeah, they have chosen this color as its signature for decades. It encourages buyers to consume its beverage, and it aligns with the company's exciting brand. Okay, and now we have the color of light with life. Without exaggeration, it does represent life. It is reminiscent of grass, trees, bushes. Green brings upon feelings of relaxation, health, prosperity, hope, freshness. But because of its, let's say, primitive nature, the color can also represent boredom, stagnation, even blandness. So as you've seen so far, there are positives and negatives to all colors. Whole Foods is the example used over there. They use green because of their reputation for fresh, high-quality products. The brand positions itself as America's healthiest grocery store. So using a color associated with health and growth aligns with their mission statement. And I chose American brands for a reason, which I'm not going to name. Similar to orange, yellow represents youthfulness and happiness. It's the color of smiley faces, sunflowers, and rubber ducks. Brands use yellow to tap into optimism, creativity, extroversion, and warmth. But however, yellow branding could also foster feelings of fear, irrationality, and anxiety. Police tape, traffic lights, street signs all feature yellow. In other words, remember this? It's a cautionary tale diving into the color. McDonald's golden arches make great use of yellow's positivity. Its yellow branding tied together with the appetite-inducing red generates a youthful happy association for the fast food chain. Happy Meals donned with a yellow smiley face, they basically further affirm its kid-friendly reputation. So they do have that as well. And black. Well, black on websites, emails, and logos, you will find it everywhere. It's a staple color, and as a staple color, it can make a brand appear sophisticated, powerful, and elegant. Many luxury companies, Chanel, for instance, use black to make their logos look sleek and refined. It also makes sense that around 3 in 10 high-tech companies use black in their logos. But black also represents oppression and coldness. People could even perceive black as emblematic of evil. Yeah, and then I'm giving examples from cartoons as well, with the hope of not offending anyone. Ursula in the Sea Witch, yeah, or Scar in the Lion King, yeah, the bad character in the Lion King. And while black works wonders in the fashion industry, the effect doesn't always translate in everywhere. For instance, black is rarely seen in the health industry, well, because it resembles death and mourning. The example provided here is Nike. They utilize black and white advertising and the signature swoosh logo to reinforce its power-focused branding. The company bases its messaging around empowering athletes and helping customers grow into stronger performers, which is a perfect use of the elegant black. And immediately after black, we have what? With white, if your business is aiming for a clean, simplistic vibe, white may be an ideal choice. Alongside black, white evokes a modern feel and can help achieve a pure, innocent, and pristine look. On the other hand, white can be sterile, like a hospital. Without colors, it might make your brand seem plain, boring, empty. But like most colors, it depends on context. Some of the most innovative brands in the world, including Apple and Tesla, have white logos. Black works for Nike in the same way white works for Adidas. Unlike Nike, Adidas targets a less athletic set of customers. They regularly partner with non-athletes, including musicians, artists, and the like. So white basically enables them to tap into a simplistic universal appeal. And last but not least, pink. For no particular reason, just because I like it. As the most popular color to represent femininity, pink can work for any brand looking for a more youthful, imaginative, and quirky feel. T-Mobile or Telecom in our case. For example, they lean on the magenta coloring to help it stand out among competitors. Yeah, pink also generates childish or rebellious vibes. Its initial exposure has shown to wane as shoppers get used to the color. If you've been to Victoria's Secret, maybe those rosy walls can feel a bit nauseating after a while, but for companies like Barbie, on the other hand, pink can be the perfect combination of femininity and youthfulness. Yeah, the Dolls Giants pink logo helps it market its products to a young audience.
PowerPoint presentation because I see lots of color. And mine was on the black and white. So it is about religion, which is not the black and white. So probably color will not really qualify what we are going to talk about. And yeah, and I have to admit that you were right about stranger danger, but from a different perspective, because theoretically action does refer to sexual predators, and the real danger does not really come from strangers. In terms of percentages coming from real cases. So yeah, you can actually for different kinds of reasons, yes, you can actually take that into consideration. All right, but normally, probably I might have had it fights on the board, but if I actually say overcoming cultural barriers resulting from religious diversity, you will remember for about 15 seconds to try so, then we'll move on further to discuss it a bit. It's probably from the perspective of interpreters or translators or intercultural mediators, which I try to have this perspective of the religion, because as in some probably forms of sometimes groups could be a taboo subject sometimes, or if it's not really taboo, it's a really sensitive topic. Extremely sensitive. Even people in here would be really sensitive about what we're going to talk about. I try to keep things a bit light, probably go a bit general, but when talking about cultures and communication across cultures, yes, we can actually sometimes hide this metaphor, but religion is an important topic in terms of what we have to sometimes surpass, overcome in order to have something which is efficient in one way or another. Because probably if we refer to the case in Germany, which is what we call a developed country, in Europe, it's the reference, and we did have migration in kind of one of Western country, which you say probably is the most or the best prepared to receive immigrants for different cultures from a multitude of languages and of course regions. And the fact that the immigrants learn the language, do you actually solve the communication problem? Do you solve the problem of communication yourself? Well, yes, if the language is a barrier, but the most romantic thing is language is not in itself the barrier. I mean, it is to a certain extent, because yes, you have the written language, the oral language, but you also have language which is in terms of not necessarily using words or writing, which is non-verbal communication. And according to studies, that amounts to 65 to 70% of all communication. And it's about non-verbal communication. It's not about German immigrants. It's about their culture and basically, especially with the religious background they actually have. Why did I actually choose the case of Germany itself? Because in terms of percentages, it's probably around 23 million Catholics, 21 million Protestants, and probably close to, I think I only took a close look at the Turkish people. So it's kind of, it was in 2020, 6 million. So Catholics and Protestants basically are the majority, and then the people, especially of Islam, in terms of religion, have to actually, I don't know, integrate or have to deal with in terms of the mainstream perception. And why is basically, which is like something problematic also in terms of interpreting and translation or the interpreters or the mediators. For instance, there was an incident in 2012 in Afghanistan, where it had the UN troops, and they publicly burned the Quran, which is a huge offense in any country there, but especially it was in Afghanistan. And it turned out it was actually a mistake a problem in communication with the interpreter. So the soldiers did this, but it turned out it was actually a mistake in terms of the way the mediator and the way they understood what was going on. And yes, the president of the United States actually apologized and he expressed the regrets of this. Did they really kind of solve the problem? Probably to a certain extent, because there were lots of protests and shooting and even people kind of lost their life. But the idea in itself is a simple act can sometimes actually lead to people losing their life. So why is not only the interpretation or translation enough? Because it's not just about words, it's also about non-verbal communication, it's also about understanding cultures, and also it comes to what we call public services, which is medicine, law, or education. And even in universities in here, we do have courses which are in terms of translation, but we, in the vast majority situation, won't cover the language or the linguistic components. Is this enough where you actually have to do the interpretation or the mediation? Not by far, because we don't really understand, probably up to superficial level only, the implication of what the culture, especially which is deeply rooted in religion, can actually express just by non-verbal communication. If we take probably a research at the University of Heidelberg in 2021. So what they did, they actually interviewed Muslims of migrant origin, and they had two questions. Do you consider your beliefs, practices, and customs based on your faith in Islam to be a barrier to communication in Germany, which is a traditionally Catholic country with a high rates of Protestant population? And the second question, to what extent do you consider that your way of life, influenced by your religious convictions, is often misinterpreted and has an undesired and usually negative effect on our interlocutor, or on your interlocutor? Now, even in probably our context in Romania, I mean, not inside Europe, which theoretically, officially, we are a secular society, officially. Right, unofficially, probably the reality is slightly different. But these kind of questions sometimes seem to be a little bit of encroaching on your personal space, your personal probably perceptions, and sometimes you're reluctant to answer these kind of questions. The problem is, if you cannot actually communicate and try to find out what really bothers or is encroaching on somebody else's freedom in one way or another, you cannot really understand and find ways of solving the problems. And as it turns out, in the multiple choice situations, it is culturally based. For instance, we have an Indian man, he's 52, he was basically involved in a court case. And he had the interpreter, and he was asked by the judge basically several questions. And in some cultures, and you already know this, there are some cultures by themselves. For instance, when you actually say something, you move your head from left to right, which is basically the opposite of what in Western societies. All right, so when you say something, I mean, I cannot do it the Indian way because it's a bit, you have to be more flexible than I am, right? The interpreter actually translated the words, but the non-verbal communication was the exact opposite. So then actually the judge was confused because he heard the words by themselves, but they actually made no sense in terms of what he was actually saying. So he heard one thing, he saw a different one. And this was where the mediator, it's not just the interpreter or the translator, you have to be a mediator, especially when these kinds of situations happen. You had to explain this. And of course, when you actually deny something, it's again the opposite of what we do in Western society. You just move your head, I don't know, forward and backwards. Or it's exactly the same person. For instance, when you strongly disagree with a fact or with a statement, you probably kind of lay back your head and kind of have some. Which in Western society, sometimes we say this for probably about you have total disregard for a topic, or you consider it unimportant, or I won't be wasting my time with this nonsensical talk. And again, it was interpreted as showing contempt or lack of interest. And again, it was the role of the mediator. So communicating across cultures is not essentially about learning words or grammatical structures. It's basically about cultures and especially non-verbal communication. Or you do have that, for instance, a woman cannot look at a man in the eye, a Muslim woman. And for instance, in Western societies, do we really understand this? I mean, if a person is talking to you and probably saying, probably relating some serious accusations about another, a male, let's say, but she is not looking at the police officer in the eye. I mean, she's looking at a totally different direction. In Western societies, we interpret that she's probably not being true to reality itself because she's avoiding eye contact. Because we know that when we have visual contact, you can read beyond and behind words themselves, so you have the interpretation. And in the particular situation, these were interpreted as somebody who is concealing the truth or lying or being hesitant about it. Because gazing in one way or another, in Western society, probably just looking a person in the eye is considered an important part of communication.
They say people blinking, it's lying.
Yes, or kind of touching your face and whatnot. And probably if you have time because she is not all right, but probably 2 or 3 more minutes. Also, in terms of in Western society, for me, not that much because we're not yet Western society, we're in Eastern Europe. But personal space is really important. And in Muslim countries, if somebody, we don't have the concept of invading your personal space because being too close to each other is perfectly fine. But if you turn away, if somebody's really too close to you, it's considered kind of an insult. But I mean, contradictory to this is the rest with couples are not supposed to be holding hands in public. So kind of this kind of personal contact is not or is frowned upon in these kind of cultures. What else probably could be of interest in the last 3 or 4 minutes, which I have? Probably clothing, which is again problematic, and it's been for a while. We don't really have solutions to this. I mean, general solutions, we just improvise one country with another. It's head covering, the hijab. And yes, we do associate with Islam, but not solely. The idea itself is Western society, do we accept it or not? And if we do, how do we interpret it? We understand what is going on in terms of these kind of situations, or do we really understand why they are actually doing that, or doing this head cover? In the vast majority of situations, and some of the interviewed people, especially the Muslim women, when they were actually talking about the fact that they chose to have a head cover, they said that in the vast majority of situations when they were in the company of their husbands and they had to deal with officials, the most probably looks were cast at their husbands because the officials or the third party interpreted that the husband was forcing the women to actually wear them for the head cover, not that they actually were convinced that this is what they should do and they wanted to do this. So they did feel a bit of I don't know, lack of respect for their own convictions, or the idea that when going to, I mean, for us, it's kind of a casual thing to do, going to a specialist or going to a physician. If it's a woman or a man, the doctor, it's the same thing to us. But it kind of raises really difficult situations for people of the Islam faith, for instance, because theoretically they should be of the same gender. I mean, if you're a woman, you should be seen by a woman doctor. If you're a man, theoretically you should be seen by a male doctor. There are sometimes different interpretations. For instance, sometimes females feel that if the specialist is not of the same conviction, religious conviction, a different culture, they no longer have to actually show, or this no longer applies into their situation because it's not in the same culture. But not in all situations. Or, for instance, they're not supposed to show their bodies to people unless they are mahram. It means people who are really close connection to the family. In Iran, for instance, if a female has to be seen by a doctor and you only have male doctors, so theoretically this is not allowed, but the doctor then can sign a document where he assumes the mahram relationship, which means for a limited period of time, he is part of the extended family by himself. So the moral obligation is already the one or one way or another is kind of taken care of. So I have one more 2 minutes. All right. Now, in terms again, not necessarily linguistic problems. There was a family with 3 children, and they're immigrants to Germany. And we don't really understand the difference between domestic and sacred space in the house. I mean, in here, in Christian household, because we don't have this. I mean, domestic is just domestic. It's not supposed necessarily to be sacred. This is your home, which is sacred by itself. But it's not for them in the same way. For instance, they have 3 rooms, they have 3 children. The one room was for the couple, I mean, for the husband and their wife. The other one was for the children. And the third one was the sacred space. It was for worship. And you know, when you have children that have friends, and the friends come and visit, and one of the parents who picked up their kids when they were visiting the family, they noticed that there was an extra room which was not used for the family, and they said it's a waste of space. And yes, in our eyes, it is a waste of space, but not for them, because that's the sacred room. And also, of course, because we have social workers, sometimes we have social workers. Was this time that room which was empty in one way or another, meaning not necessarily used for other purposes, it was decided that wasting space. So I should not show. Probably one more quotation about clothing in itself. It comes from a Muslim woman. She says, nowadays it seems that this is probably a quote you might enjoy. Let's see actually how intense our looks are. It's not working, you see. It does not really help.
The message that I need to.
I need you to listen to this message though. So nowadays it seems that being half naked is synonymous with freedom, and that the opposite is oppression. I have often had fruitful rejection for wearing the headscarf or for dressing in a more covered up way, specifically because of comments from other women who ask you why you are wearing that, and if you are forced to wear the headscarf. And I think we can relate to this in one way or another, because yes, we do say verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and we don't really agree with that. Probably that we probably when it's about burqa, it's a slightly different story. And yes, we can understand, especially from the Western point of view, because it might interfere for you when you're driving, for instance, might impair visual impairment, or if you have to travel and you go to an airport and you have the security checkups, and you see a person who you don't actually see who that person is, will you actually feel comfortable in that kind of scenario? I mean, you don't know who that person is. I mean, you don't even see anything, especially in the book. I mean, you don't have the eyes yet, you can see the eyes, but you don't know, especially in today's society, you don't feel secure. So it is a bit of a clash in between, and you have to either give up on something or have, I don't know, try to understand the other person's perspective. But yes, we do have the eyes, which are important in all communication. You do have the face, which is sometimes covered in these kind of situations. However, scientists have actually discovered what we perceive first and what our impressions are mostly probably formed by. It's not necessarily the gestures, not necessarily the eyes, not the face. With what we say, it does not characterize when we don't do that. It's actually what we do frequently. It's a bit close. Right? Because you don't wait to see a person's eyes. You don't necessarily have to wait to see a person's face. We can judge it already from a distance when you only perceive his clothes. If you see a homeless person, you wait for him for 15 more seconds to hit his face and his hands in order to form an opinion, or they have already formed it. Yes, we don't want to admit it and we judge, but it's already in our instinct. So it's the same basically here, when you see probably a Muslim woman wearing that. Even if we see the hand or the eyes or not, we already start forming an opinion or whatever the difference. So again, these kind of situations lead to hatred or racism and xenophobia. And even though we do state out loud, yes, we're part of the Western society, yes, we're tolerant, we're not racist. I think sometimes we consider ourselves not being racist because we've never been exposed to a racist situation. I mean, in here in Bangladesh, I mean, how many different races we encounter on the street each and every day? And then, how do I know? Because I've never been tested. I can claim anything. Probably I can even claim I can fly if I'm not supposed to jump over a high building. So unless I'm tested, I can claim actually anything. But doesn't mean it is totally true, not necessarily. So probably she's not here to admire it, I try to keep it brief. When Pope Francis, because let's actually finish with Pope Francis's quote, we have to, or he called everybody to work together so that there will be no more walls that separate us. So again, as you actually see, it's mine. All right, thank you. I connect actually your.
Yeah.
And who started also today?
Yes. Thank you. All righty.
Yeah. Some gathered the stage. The master forget it.
Let's see it through.
That's the master.
The mess. Hello, outside. In the parking lot. So this guy is waiting for everyone, yes, with the transportation to the house, yeah. Okay.
All right.
There and then beautiful.
All right.
You see the monastery, yeah.
So before we go, I also want to thank all of our folks online. There are folks from Ghana, Nigeria who have been on since we started in the morning. They are still participating, and they will be here tomorrow and the next and the days after. So we just want to thank all of them for being here, and have a blessed evening and enjoy the rest of the evening. And we'll see you tomorrow at 10. All right. Thank you. Thank you, online folks. Thank you too as well.